All right, welcome aboard, everyone. Charles Moscowitz live. You can call in, of course, 508 637 5596, 508 637 5596, or you can go to the chat. We actually get those now. I finally figured out how to do that.
Oh,
Um,
good.
Michael D. Shaw is here. And, Mike, we're in those very interesting times here as we approach the arrival of what we've all hoped for, dreamed for, and that is the advent of this great new administration.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't, I am just looking forward to it. I feel anxious that something horrible could happen because we can't tell the future. And the deep state, they don't mess around, as we know. But so far, so good. President Trump is really making some waves. He's already changed many of the course of history, even before he's entered office. And I particularly want to talk about his recent comments about Canada being the 51st state and
Huh.
the annexation of Greenland, the purchase of Greenland, and the straightening out of the situation around the Panama Canal, possibly also military incursions into Mexico if they don't cooperate with the defeat of drug cartels and gangs. What say you? I mean, I think it's all great.
Well, it is all great, and it portends the end of the squishy era as started by James Earl Carter,
Hmm.
who persists being around. And the
Yes,
Panama Canal thing is just sort of a microcosm of everything, right? That was an absurd deal. And already the whining from Panama is amazing. I mean, God knows how much they've been ripping off the U.S. on these fees.
right. And also implementing allowing communist China to have a freer reign. I think that they've purchased properties right by the canal,
Yeah,
and all of it is in violation of the treaty that they did sign accompanying the return of the canal
right.
under Jimmy Carter. Now, you mentioned Jimmy Carter. This is a very, I'm glad you brought that up because
Anytime.
that is a classic symptom of the destabilization of America's position in the world. Never mind domestically, that's also true. But I mean, Carter, besides handing over the Panama Canal on a silver platter, which was sovereign American territory, and which has it's critical to American national interests, he also sold out our ally in Nicaragua. He
Yes.
sold out our ally in Taiwan by recognizing Communist China as a member of the UN, tossed them overboard. He sold out, across the globe. I mean, there are so many other examples of. I mean, he sold. Look what happened in Iran. I mean, he sold out our ally in terms of the Shah of Iran. Maybe not a perfect ruler of Iran, but nevertheless,
A little better than the Ayatollahs do.
yeah. I mean, he could have maybe used some quiet leverage to have Pahlavi maybe improve things a little bit in Iran instead of coming out publicly and literally engaging in regime change, which resulted in the Ayatollah and it resulted in the Soviet Union invading Afghanistan. And the assassination of, as we look at the assassination of the South Korean
Right.
President Park. I mean, there are all these things that went with this really, kind of half baked utopian idea that he would support human rights as a major cornerstone, which of course he didn't do anyway.
No,
Because
no.
do you think the people of Iran achieved human rights under the mullahs?
I think you're being too kind to him.
Yeah,
I'll tell you why. He was always one of these which way does the wind blow guys. Everybody seems to forget that only a couple of years before he ran for president, he was a segregationist on the state senate of Georgia.
right.
Okay,
When he ran for governor of Georgia, he ran against Lester Maddox, and he was very much as much a Southern, kind of that old
Yeah.
cloth there, for sure. Completely
So,
hypocritical.
it was obviously the flavor du jour to be a civil rights guy, but then it was also the flavor du jour to be a flower child, which in essence he was. But even then, I don't think he believed a damn thing that he did. I think it was all facade, and maybe someone was trying to control the guy, but every single thing he did failed. And let's not forget when the prime interest rate was 18% under this schmuck. All
Right.
right. Um,
Plus he raised the capital gains tax.
yeah.
He tanked the economy. I mean, right. I mean, everything he touched turned to crap. And,
Department of Education, that was
the
his.
Department of Education, I mean, which would implement what we have now with the woke
Yeah.
dictatorship, and was meant to, and it was a sellout to teachers unions who had been trying to gain that position for many, many decades. I mean, Reagan came along, and I think he reversed some of it. Could have
Yeah.
done more, but he did a good deal. And now we have Trump coming along and reversing this horrendous slide that this country has experienced, by basically reasserting American power, reasserting American influence in the Western Hemisphere, which is our area of influence, and that goes
Yeah.
back in American
Monroe
history.
Doctrine. Yeah.
Monroe Doctrine, John Quincy Adams, Secretary of State, said that, look, on the one hand, there will be no uh, European or foreign interference in the Western Hemisphere, no colonization. Since then, there's only been two examples of where a foreign force tried to colonize the Western Hemisphere, and that was during the Civil War. The French propped up a Maximilian as king of Mexico. The only reason they
Oh,
could
yeah.
get away with it was because we were too distracted with the Civil War. And then, of course, 1960, Castro,
Yeah.
being implemented in Cuba. So, what Trump is doing is he's reasserting the Monroe Doctrine. As far as Canada goes, I think that's an interesting case because I think that Canada, particularly under Trudeau, has virtually become a failed state. I mean, if you take a look at their economy, their level of freedom, they put a man in prison for reading a Bible passage on homosexuality or something like that. I don't know what it was, but he read the Bible passage and he was put in prison. They don't have a constitution. It's very authoritarian. Their economy is shrinking.
Well, Chuck, like father, like son, right?
Right, except I think Trudeau's even worse than Pierre Elliott.
No, I was talking
It's a
about Fidel
favorite.
Castro being his
Oh,
father.
you're talking Fidel.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, anybody who takes a look, even a casual look at those images, they can see that
Yeah.
that it's quite clear that he's Castro's the father, and he's made a complete and utter wreck of Canada. Now, I remember James Buchanan, who I used to admire. I still admire. I read several of his books. He
You
talked
mean
about the Pat Buchanan. Thank you. James Buchanan is another subject.
Yeah.
That was a president before Lincoln. No,
The
Pat
first king
Buchanan.
president. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he wrote a very good column where he talked about the fact that the United States should annex parts of Canada, especially the western provinces, because they're a lot more like us, and they're kind of
They
in
are.
opposition to this sort of slide towards socialism. Places like Alberta and Saskatchewan and British Columbia, maybe Manitoba, that Quebec should be an independent state. It's a different culture, different language, different religion. It's not, they should and they deserve to be independent. The maritime provinces could be also like New England,
Yeah.
and maybe leave Canada, Ontario. I mean, he literally wrote this. I mean, which in a way, it's not an unreasonable proposition. I mean, Canada was, an enemy of the United States right up to the time of Teddy Roosevelt, who was an Anglophile and who wanted to kiss up to the royal family and who believed in this concept of an Anglo-American establishment that was talked about by Professor Carroll Quigley in his book Tragedy and Hope. And that they're not, it's kind of like a backwater of the old British Empire anyway.
That's exactly right. But it's funny that Canada isn't the only one like that. Australia and New Zealand also share this
Oh yeah,
socialistic, authority worshiping kind of personality that, I mean, to be fair, you don't see in all of Canada, but you see in Ontario, you see in some parts of the other provinces, but you could make, as Buchanan did, a very strong case for annexing. Let's talk about the Atlantic provinces, Maritimes, as you mentioned.
right.
They have far more in common with New England, United States, than they do with any part of Canada.
That's right, and they're very much like Maine and New Hampshire.
Yeah,
They could get, first of all, they would have lower tax rates. They would have a more pro-business approach, especially under Trump.
yeah,
And they would probably boom as American states. I mean, it would be a huge opportunity for these provinces to become prosperous and to really become on their own, because I think that this phony Canadian Union is really, it's not organic, and it kind of holds them back. Plus, I mean, from a strategic standpoint, it makes sense because Canada has a lot of wealth in terms of oil and
yeah.
resources, and all the way up to the North Pole. And it makes sense for the United States to form this stronger union for the future. I mean, I mean, it's interesting to think about. I mean, I'm not saying that we need to call up the army and march over there. It would
No,
have
but
to
I
be,
bet if you had a referendum,
yes, that's right.
province by province, uh, people like Trudeau might get their feelings hurt. I can't imagine, other than portions of Quebec and Ontario, uh, wanting to stay within Canada, and parts of BC are pretty left wing. But fine, you
Right.
can keep all that. We'll we'll take Alberta,
That's
Manitoba.
right. And maybe turn Newfoundland or back to the British. Whatever. The point is that, I mean, it's as it's presently constituted, it's they could do better. I mean, it's
Well, they could do a lot better. And the parliamentary system has so failed the people in the smaller provinces, it's a joke. I mean,
right.
how would you like it if in your presidential election, after a few of the eastern states voted, you might as well not go to the polls?
But I mean, they have been agitating about that. They've been really removed from power for forever, and that Ottawa is completely under control of the globalists. And I mean,
Yeah.
Trudeau is a classic toady of the World Economic Forum. He was a student of that. He's just in a way he represents the very face of Canada, of the Canadian. What's wrong with Canada? He's on his way out, but yet he won't leave. He's in because he has this inflated sense of himself. It's very corrupt. I also have heard at the top levels there. And when I say corrupt, I mean, some stuff that, let's not get into it, but just really nasty things. And now with Trump in office, he is teetering, and it's Trump's comments about Canada is I don't see a lot of uproar over that in
No,
Canada.
no, there's a lot of
You have
agreement.
there's a lot of uproar among the radical left here because their heads are blowing up. But I don't think in Canada, I don't see much. You also mentioned Australia and New Zealand. I mean, yes, talk about authoritarian. I mean,
Yeah, that
you
same
saw,
sort of British weird mentality. I mean,
we,
let's be
we
honest.
saw what happened during COVID. I mean, they were
Yeah.
setting up concentration camps and putting people away who refused to wear a mask in public and
Yeah.
who refused the jab. I mean, we're talking like, the kind of stuff that, I mean, it was way above and beyond. I mean, they have laws. I mean, we have censorship here, which is starting to disappear. But in Australia, it's like it's extreme. I mean, you cannot criticize COVID. I mean, you can't criticize the jab or whatever else is on their agenda at any given time. You go to
Well,
jail.
when I first noticed, well, I mean, Canada's always had this authoritarian type of mentality, and a lot of people seem to like that because of this paternalistic state. But
Mm.
where I really first noticed this humongous censorship regime, and you may remember this going back to the late 80s, early 90s, a guy by the name of Ernst Zundel
Well, that
was
was for the
writing,
Holocaust, right?
yeah, was writing, let's say, Holocaust denying type of things. All
Right.
right, fine. That's his opinion. He got put into jail for this sort of thing. And you're wondering, like, what?
Well,
And
unfortunately, that's
that's
the influence of the ADL and some of the
yeah,
Jewish establishment, which I vigorously disagree with them on that. I mean, you can't. People have a right to their opinions. You can debate it in the public space, but this kind of censorship. And now I understand that they're trying to do it to the Catholic Church, and I really reject that. I mean, I heard Dr. E. Michael Jones talk about this, and he's actually right about it. That you have this thing where the Catholic Church is going to censor certain words that you can't say. What is it? A model sin to use the
yeah.
word, the collusion or whatever the hell. I mean, it's like anything that could be interpreted very arbitrarily as being anti-Jewish. I mean, that's ridiculous. They can't do that. I mean, first of all, it's none of the Jewish advisors who are involved in this. It's none of their damn business. They should take their nose out of the business of another religion. But they're all part and parcel of this, for lack of a better word, this new world order that is very much enthroned in places like Australia and Canada and New Zealand, and that this country has rejected with the election of Trump. I mean, it's just that simple.
Well, one
We
of the
don't
big
have.
problems with the parliamentary system is a guy like Trudeau can fail epically, but he's still going to get reelected in his own, what they call riding. So he's always going to be a power in his party unless he, leaves completely.
Well, it's a
So
parliamentary system, right? I mean,
you just can't get rid of the guy.
you can't get rid of any of those types of people. It's like Ted Kennedy. They're going to be in there for life. It's like Ayanna Pressley here in Boston. We'll never get rid of her. We'll never get rid of Elizabeth Warren. These people they're lifers. Once they get
Nancy
power,
Pelosi. There's another one.
right? AOC, Pelosi. Pelosi will be 1 foot in the grave. I mean, they'll never get rid of her. These people will never go. They know where the power resides, and they know which side of the butter is on which side of the bread. I mean, we'll never see the end of it. And meanwhile, if you're somebody who runs against this elite establishment, like Matt Gaetz, for example, you can have a body of garbage thrown at you, and you're gone. Whereas I love the fact that I don't know how he's going to do it, but he's saying that Congress has a fund that's by which they have paid out, I don't know how many millions of dollars of taxpayer money for settlements for congressmen who have been accused of sexual harassment and rape.
Right.
And that Gaetz says, and these are not like the stuff that's being thrown at Gaetz, which are just, it's kind of hearsay and accusations. This is real stuff. I mean, this is like the kind of stuff that you or I would be sent up to the big house. Right? I mean, these are real issues. And that he says that somehow he's going to be able to release that information. Maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene might be able to do it. I don't know. But I mean, if they're going to do it to Gaetz, they should do the whole thing, all of it, both today and in the past. All the names and all of the settlements and all of the dossiers or whatever should be released. Let's find out about who's done what. Probably you'll hurt a few Republicans too, but so be it.
Yeah, no argument there.
Yeah.
It would be interesting, as I said, if you had a province by province referendum, right?
Yes.
And let's say a few provinces vote to join the U.S.
It would be very interesting. Although I think that if they get rid of Trudeau and if Paul Revere comes in, he's kind of more of a Trump-like figure. They might be able to save the ship. I don't know, under that.
Well, they still have their own deep state too. Let's not forget that.
Oh yeah, well, right. And but the point is that he could maybe work with Trump to help.
Yeah.
You know, they'll have respective interests, and maybe he can pull the country together. I don't know. You know, who knows? But meanwhile, I mean, they have responded by tightening the border. They have responded to the threat of tariffs, which of course is a system that's part of any sovereign nation going all the way back to ancient Rome. I mean, that's just one of the basic functions of a sovereign nation is to make trade policy with your neighbors, and that is political. You don't want to give trade to enemies, even if it costs something, but plus it's also economic in that you want to have a trade policy that protects your own industry and your own labor.
Yeah.
And that's what I think that Canada now, with the threat of a tariff, is doing what Trump expects them to do and what we all expect, which is tightening their borders and making sure that illegals who might not wish us well aren't using that border to get across. I think a lot of them actually do it in places like Maine. So that's all. It's all moving in the right direction. Same thing with Mexico. I think that Sheinbaum has stopped these caravans. She might yell and scream about it to Trump and make him, try to make embarrassing, releases of information. At least she thinks it's embarrassing. But at the same time, you don't see the caravans happening up north.
Yeah, isn't it amazing that if they wanted to, they could stop it? It's almost as amazing as the streets of San Francisco were all cleaned up when President Xi came from China.
Yeah, they always do that. I remember Cuomo. He when I think there was some kind of a major international meeting in New York, he just swept in all the homeless people were just swept off the street and put into this big warehouse on the east side. And then after they left, they sent them back out. So, I mean, yeah, they can do it at the drop of a dime. And I think that as we see the new administration coming in, the big issue they're going to try to demagogue is going to be immigration. And I don't think it's going to work because I think that the majority of Americans want to see illegal aliens expelled.
Well, you're exactly right. And who was it? I believe the Attorney General of Arizona, who was probably illicit based on Maricopa County, saying she's she won by like 100 votes or something. Yeah.
After Tom, I don't, we could go into that. I'm on YouTube, so that's like verboten. Right. But we'll just leave it at that. But yes, what about her?
Well, no. So what I'm saying is they still feel that this is a talking point. I mean, how stupid can you be? What exactly is the constituency in support of illegals, except for maybe aspects of the food industry, the hospitality industry, but the average voter? This is not a winning point.
No, and they're crumbling. Even here in Massachusetts, Governor Maura Healey gave an interview with the Boston Globe, which he said, frank and flat out, we are going to be cooperating with the Trump administration.
Yeah.
People's heads are blowing up in this state over that. The left is like, all of a sudden, there's all this derogatory information released about her. It's like what they did to, Mayor Adams in New York. All of a sudden, we find out the Globe they released some things about her that are not pleasant. right? She took money from this person, whatever. They were holding on to these things
Yeah.
because she's bucking the tide. But and she's about as liberal and as left a political figure as you can get. She's a lesbian woman. She was elected for that reason, frankly. And yet here she's saying, I'm going to work with the Trump administration. And she's put a deadline on the money that the state is going to be giving the migrants. It's this, she says, we're going broke. We're going to be running out of money, and it's going to end. I think she said February 1st. Now this wouldn't have happened had Trump not been elected.
Oh, no, but even she realizes this is not a good position. And
Right.
I really fail to see how some of these absurd liberal positions are part of any sort of left-wing
It's
politics.
crumbling. It's crumbling. And now I think that even Newsom and that fat governor of Illinois,
Pritzker.
they think Pritzker thinks he's going to run for president on defending illegal aliens.
Now, we've already had a fat president with William Howard Taft.
I know exactly. They had to build a special bathtub. But, I don't think that it's going to work for any of them. I mean, Chicago is up in arms over this, especially the Black community.
Yeah.
They're like, no, they're taking over all of the facilities that we had built for us. They're taking over. They're moving into taking our jobs. And there's been some city hall meetings in Chicago where people are like really stepping up, and these are minority citizens.
Yeah.
And I mean, the mayor apparently there, Brandon Johnson, who's another leftist figure, he had to leave through the back door in one of these meetings. They didn't expect that. Now they're all in hiding. So I think it's crumbling. I don't think they're gonna, they think they're gonna crank up a big propaganda machine. Oh, Trump is cruel and he's separating families. I loved Homan was asked that. He's a no nonsense, tough, hard nosed guy, and he's like, we're not going to separate families. We'll send them all out.
That's right.
They can all go together. And I think that when they cut off the money, it's going to be a big self-deportation, probably by the millions.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the other ones might end up getting a job, in which case, I don't think that, from my understanding from watching an interview with Stephen Miller, they're not going to go after them so quickly. They're going to cut off the money. They're going to go after the criminals, the easy, kind of the low-hanging fruit, the people that we all, they're not going to, generate any kind of sympathy. And then for the rest of them, whoever's left, who knows what, I mean, maybe there might be even some negotiation where they can get, if they're gainfully employed, they can get some kind of a, temporary visa or something. I don't know. But either way, it's moving, and then they mean business.
Well, I mean, you as a student of politics, how did the people on the left ever think this was a winning strategy? If you're the typical blue collar guy and you're supposed to be the lifeblood of the Democratic Party, which isn't true anymore, how is it going to appeal to that base to be in support of all this woke agenda? What's the gain?
I don't know. I mean, for the immigration thing, I mean, they're talking about Trump building detention centers. I guess what? They were built by Obama.
Yeah.
And Obama was pretty tough on illegal aliens, by the way. It was Obama who built those cages that they showed during the first Trump administration. I mean, it's I don't think they're going to get away with that. I love the fact that Trump sued Stephanopoulos and ABC and won. And I think that, he's threatening to sue other people, Disney. He's involved with censorship. BS, that's not censorship. He's talking about fraud. A media outlet doesn't have the right to engage in outright lying and fraud. Another example of that is this woman who was a pollster in Iowa who
That was an obvious setup. I mean,
Yeah, and the Des Moines Register, they published, 3 points ahead. I remember reading that, and I remember thinking, oh my God, your heart sank. It's like, and the point is that he's suing her, and she resigned immediately after the election because Trump won the state by 8 points. And they say, well, this is freedom of expression. Bull crap, it is.
now
That's fraud.
what had
That's
happened was,
election interference.
um, and I just shook my head when that happened. All right. Here was some woman who apparently had some respect for many years. She's willing to sell out. I don't know how much she was paid. I don't know what the arrangement was for coming up with this outlier, which would be respected by people because she was a respected pollster for a million years.
Right.
She comes up with this number. You take notice. All right. Then I think he ended up winning by over 10 points, actually. So what the hell was that all about?
It was
So,
like an October surprise. And I
yeah.
remember when that came out 3 days before the election. Oh, the national media went with that like crazy. They were banging the drum. I think even the international media. Look, Kamala Harris is surging. Look at this. Look at Iowa.
What did they have on her, though, to get her to do that? How do you throw away
I think that she's an ideologue, and she wanted to, this was her big shot at doing something in the, maybe they thought they could steal it still. I don't know, but maybe they didn't think. It's like a lot of these people, like the J6 committee people, like Liz Cheney. They never thought that this would come back to bite them because they thought that they'd win. They thought that they would bury Trump. They'd put him in prison. And now it's coming back because they didn't win.
Okay, but in retrospect, how do you look at Kamala Harris and think she had a prayer?
Well, I think that they thought they could steal it. And I think they tried to. But what they came across was an aware electorate, an aware Republican Party and National Committee under Lara Trump and that other guy, who actually they replicated what Glenn Youngkin did in Virginia. They had a field of 375,000 volunteers manning the polls, manning the counting rooms, watching everything. They had a field of, I think it's about at least 500-600 lawyers, particularly in the battleground states, ready to jump. And they did jump. There were several cases,
they did.
In Pennsylvania, Michigan. The minute they saw something, they had everything ready to go, and they just went in and they put a stop to it. And I don't think that they were expecting that. I think that there were just too many eyeballs this time around on everything. And there were too many people. They just couldn't. And plus, Trump won by such a large volume. I'm sure they stole plenty, but they couldn't do it enough. They could not steal it.
The only place that they successfully stole multiple races was Maricopa.
Oh, yeah. Well, Kerry Lake, I mean, that was definitely, I think that was stolen, in my opinion. And also in California, they stole a couple of congressional seats. I mean, they're still counting in California.
Yeah, but they still turned 10 counties in California from blue to red.
They did, and now they say that Fetterman in Pennsylvania might switch to the Republican Party.
Yeah. Well, he just got that up. I mean,
I remember how much they just loved him.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden, not so much.
Yeah.
So, he's like, he can see what's happened in Pennsylvania. He actually turns out he has a half a brain. And, there's other people like that too. I mean, I think that, what's his name? Cuomo, the not the Andrew, but the other one, the brother.
Chris.
Yeah, Chris Cuomo. He's like turned.
Yeah.
And he, a lot of people are like waking up to this, and they're like, maybe they're trying to salvage what's left of their reputation. That could be.
Well, here's, in terms of that, this occurred to me just before the show. We had talked a couple of times about why Josh Shapiro didn't get it. And I'm beginning to think he didn't want it. He didn't want to be part of
Probably
Kamala.
not. Who? Yeah, no. And not only that, but I think that Biden himself stuck it to the people that deposed him,
Yeah.
like Pelosi and like that actor, what's his name, George Clooney, and everyone else who called up and said, "You got to get out." He says, "Oh yeah, fine. Guess what?" 1 minute later, he endorses Kamala Harris. They all knew she was a loser. I mean, and he knew she was a loser. And they probably wanted to put somebody else in. You notice that Obama didn't endorse her for about a week, but they were stuck with her at that point because he moved immediately within an hour of announcing he was stepping out. And it was kind of a screw you to the party. And then later on, it does appear that both he and Jill voted for Trump. And yeah, that leap seems pretty obvious.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, I mean, he's there
Jill is
wearing a Trump hat,
all red
and
on
she shows up at the
election.
polls wearing a red dress. I mean,
Yeah.
they're sending out all these sort of smoke signals. She's looking at Trump adoringly at Notre Dame. You thought she was like she was in love with him. So yeah, I mean, I think that they wanted revenge for the people that deposed him and that basically engaged in a coup against the coup. Let's just put it that way. But
That all kind of worked out. And then I was reminded, I was talking to a friend. He said, well, take a look in perspective. Obama needed a VP, so he had to pick someone dumber, so he picked Biden. Biden needed a VP, so he picked someone dumber, Harris. Harris
right.
needed a VP, so she picks, well, I mean, good grief.
It's like the genetic chain. It's like a reversal of Darwin. They're going backwards,
Yeah.
and and they've got no bench. There's no one really there. I mean, the whole party seems to be just imploding in on itself. Now, I follow on TikTok Adam Parnes, who's a real Democrat hack, and
Yeah.
who always is pushing great breaking news of Democrats. And he's pointed out, which is troubling, that a bipartisan agreement to bring in, I think it's about 35 new federal judges, it's been vetoed by Biden, mainly because he doesn't want Trump to appoint these judges. It's too late for him to do it. And that the new Congress is not going to come up with an agreement like that. And this guy's crowing about this. The MAGA movement isn't going to get their judges. They're doing these last ditch rear guard moves, and all I can say to that is Trump is going to get those judges. It may not happen this year. It may not happen until after the midterms, but before he leaves office, he's going to get every one of those patriotic, constitutionally oriented judges in place. He's already got the Supreme Court. And I think I feel pretty confident that these old leftist judges, it's not going to be a growing number over the next 4 years or 8 years.
Well, for all the people that think it's a great idea to have these ideologue judges, most cases that go to federal court are not involved in straight up politics. All right. They're
Right.
involved in various business disputes, what have you.
Yeah.
And having unfortunately been involved in a couple of federal cases, I want to tell you that this is not the best and the brightest anymore. And from my experience, the ones that pointed left, I mean, it was bad enough to be an ideologue, not to be that great of a jurist anyway. You don't want to pollute the federal judiciary with a bunch of hacks.
No, and you have those really bad ones like Chutkan in New York.
Yeah.
But the point is that they are going to be overturned by appeals courts, by the Supreme Court. They're not going to have the kind of influence they had. And, it's kind of I think, hopefully, God willing, it's a dying breed. I mean, because, they're crowing about, the point is, I think that we have Leonard Leo from the Federalist Society, who I interviewed many years ago, who they have recommended all of the judges that Trump appointed. and he's going to continue recommending judges for Trump. And these are pretty, substantial people, many of them. I mean, maybe the whole thing isn't what it once was, but you got people like Eileen Cannon. She actually took a little time to read the Constitution when she was asked whether or not the government could ban people from going on airplanes without a mask, and she said no, they can't. There's nothing in the Constitution that allows that. And then, I'm just saying there were a couple of people that he's helped put on the bench who had, I mean, Neil Gorsuch. I mean, these are pretty substantial minds. I mean, they're pretty solid constitutional people. So, I mean, this is a great benefit, and Trump is going to get plenty of appointees. There's no question. I mean, it's a very positive development, no matter what kind of bullcrap they try to pull at the last minute. And they are trying to, who knows what else they're going to do. Now they're talking, I better tell YouTube to block their ears, but we know that there's claims that there might be another pandemic. I don't think it's going to work.
No, not this time.
They want to bring up, I think there are 3 things that are going to happen all at once: COVID, the flu, and something else. Monkey virus. I don't know. What is it?
A certain type of respiratory virus, but
right. But it's not going to work. They're not going to get the lockdowns, and you're going to get Senator Rand Paul put Fauci in prison, and he has said so openly at this point. And that there's going to be, there is going to be an element, I think, to the incoming administration that is going to take a toll of justice on the people who have weaponized this country. And it's going to be a beautiful thing. I hope that
the challenge, though, to our side is when you start going after these once revered, and wrongly so, but once revered institutions. I mean, there were people that were in the know about Tony Fauci back in the 80s. But that was really sort of blasphemy, because how can you go against this great and wonderful wizard?
Oh, he represents science, right? He even said so. I am science.
Yeah. And as we've said on this show a couple of times, the very mysterious death of Kary Mullis, who was really an opponent of Fauci from day one, it's going to be another one of life's little mysteries. All right.
I think there's actually a little bit of I saw something actually about another death that looked like it was connected to Fauci. This couple that were about to expose something around the pandemic. So, this is a dangerous business. I mean, these people there's a lot of money involved. People made billions of dollars on that. And, that's going to be a really tough and thorny thing to take on. And I think that probably the one candidate, cabinet position that we really have to stand up for is Kennedy, because that's going to be a tough one. They're not going to sit back for that. I mean, you see the hate mongering and the smear. I mean, that's
the latest thing that Kennedy came up with, which is a hell of a good idea, is to ban pharma ads on TV.
Oh yeah.
Of course.
Now that's going to be a tough one, because the media,
because TV wouldn't exist now.
Lester Holt won't be on the air without the pharma ads. I mean, there's every other ad is a pharma ad. They spend who knows how many billions of dollars, and that's why they own Congress. That's why you can't. That's why YouTube will take me off the air for even saying the word COVID. Yeah. It's like they own everything. I mean, there's so much money involved internationally. So I think that it's going to be miraculous if Kennedy gets in there, because
there are people saying it's a done deal. I've seen that.
Okay.
Because if there's things you don't like about the guy, there's a lot more that's good. And the obvious argument is, look, are you so thrilled with the healthcare system now? Do we do such a bang-up job on COVID?
They're playing the old playbook of bringing up, digging into someone's personal life and talking about something Kennedy might have done, back in the 70s. I don't think it's going to work.
No.
I don't think it's going to work against Pete Hegseth either. And I don't think it's going to work against, now they're saying that Pam Bondi stole a dog or something. I don't know, some weird thing. I mean, it's just not going to work. I don't see that as happening, and I think that we can turn that one on its head because I mean, what is this? Like so self-righteous Victorian era. All of a sudden, everyone's little peccadillos from back in the '60s is going to be dredged up. Think about that. I mean, that's crazy
Yeah.
that they're going to do that to someone. I mean, I would just hope that they could say, "Hey, it's none of your damn business." These things. It's my personal life, and too bad. I mean, I'm here. Right, I'm taking a cabinet position by which I'm going to be administering an agency. The question is whether or not I'm able to or capable of conducting that office, not whether I had an affair in 1963. I mean, I just hope that they can. It's like what they did to Kavanaugh, what they tried to do to Clarence Thomas. I mean, they're going to try that kind of stuff again.
I'm
I
not
mean,
sure that it's going to have the same impact.
yeah, I hope.
And I mean, how many times can you do this? I mean, E. Jean Carroll had accused how many people of rape and
The only
sexual.
reason they got away with that because you had a corrupt judge and a Trump-hating jury. That
Yeah,
has really eroded my faith in the jury system. I
just
remember, yeah, I mean, I always thought that a jury of a group of jurors, regular citizens, you'd have at least a couple of people in there who have some integrity. I mean, I think that just before you know, the Melvin Bragg trial, you had this woman quit the jury, and she gave an interview, and she said, "Look, they've already decided to convict Trump because they're giggling in there. Oh, we're going to get Trump! Hooray, hooray!" Before the thing started, and she didn't want to have anything to do with it. And that's what's happened. I mean, this one with Carol. I mean, it's obviously something. They changed the law so that they could extend the statute of limitations over 30 years ago,
yeah,
and then she couldn't remember the year it happened. I mean, obviously, because if she did mention a date or a year, then Trump would have been free like anyone else to corroborate his whereabouts at that time. He couldn't do that, so he had no defense. It was just this vague thing. And this idea that he attacked her in Bergdorf Goodman,
which
this is
was the
preposterous.
exact plot of a Law and Order episode.
I mean, first of all, Donald Trump at that time was a pretty famous figure in New York. He's going to walk into this high visibility department store where you have, the minute you walk in the door, especially someone like Trump, you're going to have all these people. Oh, let me help you, sir. Let me do it. And he's going to rape someone. I mean, it's preposterous. And they all knew it. And this woman was a whack job, just like he said.
Yeah.
And I mean, she'll never, hopefully, God willing, she'll never see a dime.
Yeah.
And Trump is going to challenge it. But the point is that that's the whole point of lawfare. They knew that these cases, all of them, are going to lose, but they wanted to bring them because they thought they could throw enough mud and use the system to damage Trump to the point where they could at least stop him from winning another term and hopefully put him in prison. And they knew that ultimately it's all going to get thrown out because it's all crap. And it is getting thrown out. I mean, Fonnie Willis, that's gone. This stuff is garbage. And it's such a cynical thing to use.
You have to look at who they thought their allies were. All right, look, if you're the chosen person who's going to bring a case against Trump, maybe they could find someone who herself isn't a scumbag, but they just can't help it.
Well, it just shows that Trump is probably the most investigated person in history.
Yeah.
I mean, if you did anything slightly wrong, I mean, it's on the front page of the New York Times. I mean, you've got the first term, and I hope he's learned his lesson, and I think he has. He was surrounded by snitches who were dropping a dime every time he went to the toilet. They would call. I mean, they were bugging him. I mean, these things are all felonies, by the way. I mean, all the times we heard Trump made a comment about, the shithole countries or some stupid thing,
Right.
comment he might have made. Whoever leaked that committed a crime. You can't leak, phone calls, you can't leak, information said in confidence at a meeting. I mean, and also people around Trump have immunity. That's why Steve Bannon went to prison for that, because he would not discuss a private conversations he was having with Trump. They can't that's true of any like executive at a corporation or at a company. There is a certain agreement of confidentiality in conversations. And you can't make somebody, it's like, I suppose the ultimate example is a marriage, right? You can't tell somebody they have to testify against their spouse. You can't tell a priest that they have to reveal stuff said in the confession booth. You can't tell a lawyer that they have to reveal a private conversation with their client. These are protected conversations. If we don't have that kind of property and that kind of propriety, then we really have no freedom in this country.
Yeah.
And yet with Trump, they were just doing that left and right. And you had people go out like that scumbag Scaramucci and these other people. They write a book, they leave the administration and they make millions of dollars. I mean, the worst one is his niece. She made, they dial into this cottage industry of Trump haters who spend a lot of money on books and on things, and they get their fat face on the newspaper and the television, and they make a quick killing on some stupid book. Anyways,
well, there's certainly a market for people to want to read Trump hatred. I mean, you had to ask yourself, how does this niece that he hasn't even really been in contact with, how is she an expert on?
Well, I think that her beef really was with not just with Trump, it's with that whole family. Yeah. But the only reason she got any traction out of it was because it was Trump, and she went to the meeting and said, "Hey, I got some dirt on President Trump. I've got some juicy stories to tell," and they gave her like $10 million, and she got her up on Rachel Maddow every night, and that's what it's like. You sell that. I mean, this former press secretary to Melania, what's her name, Grisham, just another one of these real traitors. I mean, she ends up getting a book deal so she can dish the dirt on private, conversations. It's really despicable. I hope that Trump has learned his lesson about really being very careful about who's around him and really screening people very carefully.
He came in as a neophyte into Washington, and the tendency people will have is to surround themselves with people that know what the swamp, know what's going on. At the end of the day, though, that doesn't help because you're going to get buried by it. So I think he learned his lesson.
I hope so, and I think he has to be careful about what he says. Because it's all going to be used. I had actually a Twitter exchange during the campaign with Lawrence Tribe, who said, one of the worst. But what he said is very revealing in terms of how they operate. There was something that came out about some foreign issue, and he said, Trump is going to have to face treason charges because he probably released this information. And I let him know in my response that this was the very reason why Trump did not accept any of the briefings from the intelligence. Not only did he not trust them, but he knew that somebody could set him up like that. They could say, well, how did this information enter public discourse, this confidential information? It must have been Trump releasing it. Or maybe he tends to be a little bit loose in terms of his own verbiage, and he might have dropped something. So he deliberately and consciously said, I will not be accepting the daily briefing. For that reason, he didn't need to know this stuff. He doesn't want to know it. He didn't, it gave him. So, after that, Tribe backed down once I let him know this. He can't really make that accusation because Trump doesn't know what's, he's shielded himself. I think Trump has to do that to a certain extent as president. I think he needs to protect himself.
Yeah, it's going to be impossible to disable the entire deep state.
Oh, exactly. Look at the whole Trump impeachment over the perfect phone call. Who was listening in on that phone call? How was it that they got and then they were able to splice it up and present it in a certain way. They're going to try to do that again, and Trump has to be very, very careful about how he operates. He almost has to operate like the classic mafia don. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
Well,
like
the
you
first
don't
thing he needs to do is
what you
cancel
can't say,
security.
what you don't write, you say. What you
Right.
don't say, you nod.
Yeah.
You go like this,
Exactly.
and suddenly someone's floating in the East River. You don't say anything. You have to have like a cordon sanitaire, and
Right.
you don't want to have your name or even any hint that you had anything to do with certain things, because they're going to get you. They have you under a microscope. They're probably already bugging him now. They're gathering up intelligence. The dossier, the Steele dossier. I mean, the FISA bugging of Trump Tower. I mean, I think you have to assume that they're still doing that. And they did it throughout his presidency. All these things coming out. Nobody's thought to wonder, how did Lester Holt find out about this
Right.
comment? He found out about it because somebody committed a felony by leaking it to the media. That's how he found out. And Trump, I don't know, he has to be very careful about that.
He's got to be careful about that, and he should cancel the security clearance of all these old farts
Oh, I
that
think
used to
it's
be
that.
in the intelligence community,
Yeah, because of the
decades.
the Hunter Biden laptop,
Well,
which
why
was
the hell does
yeah.
John Brennan need a current security clearance?
He should
Exactly.
he should no. I mean, that's the fact that they lied about that is a scandal that should. It's a huge scandal. It's a direct election interference, and of course they should have at least have their security clearance revoked. They're
Right,
still
but okay, but my question is, why did they have it? Security is always based on need to know. So if you're a
I agree.
former CIA director, what's your need to know?
No, it's a good question. I mean, I think that in previous times they were basically that was their dime after leaving office. They could
Yeah.
still talk to the media, and I don't think it's right. I mean, once you're
No.
out, you're out. I don't see why they should be getting any kind of briefing. In fact, I thought the CIA, if you wrote a book, you were supposed to have it cleared with the CIA first, and they'd go through it and say this, take out stuff you can't
Right.
talk about. So I mean, yeah, I don't get that, but
Well, it was all part of the, golden parachute type situation where,
right.
for example, if you had any big job with the State Department, you traveled on a diplomatic passport. All right, you know what? Once you retired, you don't need a freaking diplomatic passport anymore. All right.
I don't think they should have any of that. There's no need for it.
It was, part of the perks, but it's stupid.
Yeah, exactly. And hopefully,
Well, I think we've lost Chuck here. We'll wait to see if this gets restored. Oh, you're
I don't
back.
know. I don't know what's going on here. Maybe was it the comment about the CIA?
I think so. I think so.
Somebody who got wind of something. I don't know. I mean, I'm not streaming on TikTok because I know they'll cancel me for this. So I'm
Is
not
there a
even.
black helicopter outside your window now?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to deny the fact that I have been paranoid about these things these past 4 years. I still am a little bit, but I feel better because I think that we're entering into a freer time.
Well,
God
do you
willing.
still get followed around the grocery store?
It's
by
definitely been done.
mysterious people.
I've never brought that kind of attention, I don't think, onto myself. But I've been banned. I mean, certainly on YouTube and on Google. I just sent YouTube a note because I know that I was banned for interviewing some people that questioned the election. I sent them a note saying, Biden is only going to be in office a few more weeks. It is no longer a threat to question the election. It's over. So would you consider reinstating me at this point? That's no longer, no one's going to call for, not that I ever did, but like a recertification or, there's no threat to the regime now because the regime is done.
They
So,
lost.
yeah, exactly. So maybe reinstate me. We'll see. I doubt it.
Well, pivoting back for a second to the
Yeah.
Stephanopoulos lawsuit, Megyn Kelly made the point that the reason they settled so quickly, ABC settled, was that Stephanopoulos was told multiple times not to use the word rape.
Mhm.
And he went ahead anyway because he's Big George, right? Now, the funny part of that is, why didn't they just fire his ass? Okay.
He's another one of these people, they'll never get rid of him. He'll never go. He's just
I
too
guess
connected.
there's enough of a ratings draw, God knows why, to see this guy.
I don't
Just
think
like
that's it. I just think he's very connected. He knows where everybody's bodies are buried. He knows everything. I think that there might be a little bit of a blackmail going on there. As is sometimes the case. And he's the type of guy who's been on the inside for so long. I mean, they want to keep somebody like that. I mean, they'll never get rid of him. There were a couple of people like that. I mean, that was like Dan Rather. I mean, they did get rid of Dan Rather eventually, but
he had to majestically fail,
I mean, he literally forged a document, or he had
Yeah.
somebody hand him a forged document that he knew was forged, and he went after a sitting president using that. And he had some other grievance. I mean, we could go back with him. I mean, there was some real cutting of corners with him. So I think it just caught up to him. Stephanopoulos, maybe that'll be how he ends up too. I don't know, but it's a good question.
Well, I mean, you're not setting a good precedent with the company that employed you that they had to pay a $15 million settlement.
No, I noticed that David Muir is resigning.
Yeah.
Maybe because he was, remember that debate where he was like debating Trump, and they kept cutting off the microphone, and they were like, it's like they were really trying to rescue her, and not, it was so. I mean, there were even jokes about this on Saturday Night Live. I mean, it was so obvious. So maybe he's been given the axe. I don't know, but a lot of these people, I think, are on shaky ground now. Even Rachel Maddow.
The other thing that happened was people were starting to echo the question that I've asked you for the last 5 years, right? Why do people watch these shows? I mean, liberal or conservative. You
Right.
get all the news you want on your phone, internet, whatever. What, you're going to plop yourself down on the couch and watch these shows for an hour every night?
No. And I've noticed, because I do watch them with my family because I have to, but I'll flip around to MSNBC, Fox, CNN, and I've noticed that they really have become very flat.
Yeah.
There's nothing to talk about. They can't pull out any more Trump hoaxes lately. I know they might try to pull out another one. I don't know. They did a whole series on Matt Gaetz. I mean, it's really, he's not even in office anymore. It's like, it's so petty and so like, it's just so tacky. I don't see how they're going to survive. They're no longer relevant. Not that they ever were. Anyway.
Well, it's far less so. But anyway, going into 2025, very optimistic.
Very good.
And I'm sure you feel the same way.
I feel very excited.
I think it's impossible for you to be 100% optimistic. You have to have a little backslide into some small amount of paranoia.
Yes. I do feel concerned, and I'll feel better once we cross the threshold and
Yeah,
President Trump is sworn in. Then
yeah.
I know that for whatever happens, you have an administration that has been elected and that's in place.
12 noon on January 20th. You'll
That is going
feel
to be, yeah, that's right. I mean, that's going to be a very important day. Although, look, at Lincoln was assassinated. I don't
yeah.
want to get into it, but I think a few weeks after he was sworn in. Putting that aside, I'm not suggesting it. I'm just
Well, Lincoln was never very popular. I mean, that was
no, but I mean, he was rubbed out. I mean,
yeah,
right? I mean, he was elected, and I mean, God forbid. I
yeah,
mean, I'm just saying. I mean, these are times that are very perilous. It's very,
indeed.
and you have somebody who there are a lot of people who would like to see this not happen. Let's just put it that way. So yeah, I feel worried.
You're
Anyway,
right. But there aren't too many common people anymore. You know, the hysterical anti-Trump common man really doesn't exist
it's
anymore.
definitely crumbling.
Yeah,
And the Trump hatred is becoming a diminishing cult.
yeah.
It's always been irrational, but they no longer have that great support by the media because they're almost like falling over now, and they got nothing else to work on. No one's every time they bring up something, some new like hoax or some new shocker, people
No,
stand by and they're applauding, hallelujah, great. They're going to do, they're going to get rid of the DEI department. Great.
yeah.
People are like, all the DEI people are going to quit if Trump is good. People
Good.
are
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's not, they realize that they don't have any support outside of their
Well, I mean,
diminishing.
I can make a silly analogy to this that anybody involved in advertising uh, over past decades would understand. All right, everybody back in the day, everybody hated their color separator. Okay, what was that? If you were doing color advertising, the way it worked, you had to separate four colors that would come together to form the image that you want. All right. It was always overpriced. There were always upcharges. Okay, here's my point. When computer graphics started coming to the fore, and now anybody could do a color separation, nobody cried one damn tear for the old color separators. So it's the same thing. There's a DEI department. You know what? We don't need it anymore.
It's like
You
the
know,
horse and buggy.
you don't hear the lamentation about that.
You're right. I mean, like in Massachusetts, the when the automobile was invented, this state had a lot of horse and buggy industry, particularly up
Yeah,
in Merrimack Valley, and they lost their jobs. I feel bad for them,
yeah,
but they tried to launch this campaign. We want to have the state subsidize us. We need to have them come in and pay us.
yeah,
It didn't work. They were all unemployed. That part of the state went into a depression that lasted many, many decades, still is
yeah.
there in a way. And that's sad, but that's progress. I mean, you had this new invention called the car. It's just that simple. And I think that they are the horse and buggy of now.
That's right.
There's no need for them anymore. They've lost their relevance. They've lost their footing. I think it's very possible that the entire Democratic Party might go by the way of the Whigs. It's no longer relevant. There's no reason. I mean, they've been exposed as being so corrupt. And I think that the final straw was Harris spending $1 billion on paying people off so that she could get interviews. I mean, Al Sharpton got a check for $500,000 a few hours before he did an interview with her.
Yeah,
They can't hide that. It just doesn't look right. It stinks. And I think it's like to my way of thinking, I think, and then she's still going on with this obnoxious, dull, droning about garbage. I mean, nobody can understand a word she says. I think that represents a jumping of the shark. What is it they say? I think
yeah.
that doesn't that come from, was it? I think Happy Days.
It's happy days. Yeah,
when you had Fonzie wearing a leather jacket on water skis and he jumps like a shark or something. The show was on its way out. It had aged out. It had its day, but it was over. And so that was like their last episode, and then they were gone. That's what's happened to the Democratic Party. They're jumping the shark. They have jumped the shark. They don't know it yet, but I think that's we're gonna see that, I think, materialize this next year. They're no longer relevant. Nobody
Sounds good
wants to
to
hear
me.
about them. What?
No, it sounds good to me.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, it couldn't happen anytime sooner. Anyway, Mike, what do you have coming up?
all right. Well, now that we finally, um, we purchased a house, so we're out of that whole rat race.
Great.
Gonna have a little more time,
Congratulations.
and I'm working on a piece, which is actually after Christmas. Unto us a child is born, but talking about some of these issues that
Yes.
what does the Democratic Party have anymore except abortion? I mean, they have no issues. They have no people. So yeah, and I'm going to put that together with a few other things and try to spend some time on it because I haven't really posted anything for about a month.
Yeah.
It's been a little hectic, but now we're back to almost normal life. Especially
By the
since
way, I listened to an interesting interview with a historian with Barry Weiss. I'm not a big fan of hers, and she does this podcast called Honestly, but once in a while I'll check her out. And he talked about the enduring value of Christianity and the ministry of Jesus.
yeah,
And I just thought it was such a powerful interview. It really kind of brought the issue home to me about why Jesus is so important in the world, putting aside the issues of divinity, just the message, the ministry, why that has been the most enduring message and the enduring figure in human history. There's a reason for that. And anyways, I recommend it. It's a good interview. It's on Honestly with Barry Weiss. We could talk about that maybe another time because we don't have time
she
today.
got kind of red pilled, and
Yeah, she did. I mean, once she had to leave the New York Times. She was too pro-Israel. It's true. Anyway, but yeah, we could talk about that maybe next time.
all right.
Happy
All
New
right.
Year.
Have a wonderful New Year.
Same to you and same to everybody. God bless
And
America.
we will be back at it.
You bet.
Bigger than